Okay, good evening. Mazel tov on the Siyum, Baruch Hashem. We finished 27 Maseches of Shas, north of 2,000 blot. What was the count? 600, 642 days until the end. We're about to start our quickest Masechta, which is Maseches Horiyos. Maseches Horiyos is most easily explained by the word horaot, which is instructions, or in this case, psakim. What if a bezdin paskins the wrong way, and we follow that false psak, that incorrect psak? So we're what we know from Shas already of this principle called the par elam dover shel tzibur, that bezdin is obligated to bring a korban when they make a mistake that causes me to do something wrong. So the example we'll be working with is if they say, dear Klal Yisrael, they put up pashkebilin, you're allowed to eat chaylev from animal X. Really, the animal, it's an Isser D'oraisa, you're not allowed to eat it. But they paskin that way, and people followed those psakim. So that's what the word Horiyos comes from. And just the layout of the page is a little bit unique. You can see that Rashi is both inside and outside margins. There are diyunim as to whether or not this in fact is Rashi Bichlal. It's just much longer than we would have expected. It doesn't really hold up to the comparisons of other Masechtas. Um, Maybe the only thing it's somewhat close to is Baba Basra after Rashi dies on Daf Chavtes. But as you can see, these are chunky Rashis. It's possibly not him. We're not 100% sure. The Shita of the Baalei Tosfos can be found at the very bottom in a much smaller font than we're used to, but otherwise with regular Diburi and Maskil. And if you flip through the Masechta, the whole Masechta looks like this. It really is pretty much consistent. There isn't a lot of Tosfos on the Masechta at all. There seems to be a good chunk of Rashi or whoever the Rishon is. Even if it's not Rashi, it is most definitely a sophisticated Rishon. That part's pashut. If you're already in the category of I'm not sure you're Rashi, you're doing great. So you don't need our askamas. There's beautiful Mari Makomos. It writes like Rashi. It's just more voluminous than Rashi, which is itself a sim. What?
The toast was quoted.
I don't know. I haven't learned a lot of them, and the ones that I've learned did not quote it. That's a very important question. The ones on the first page don't that I can see. It doesn't seem like it just from a quick glance. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to learn as much as I possibly can tonight. I'm going to go faster than I normally do. These are thick gemaras. Let's get started. Horu bezdin, if a bezdin paskin, lavor al achas mikol mitzvah sa'amuras b'Torah. They told us to violate a halacha. You're allowed to eat this chelev. V'holach hayachid v'asa shogeg al piem. And then an individual went and b'shogeg. We'll have to see what that word means. B'shogeg, he listened to them. Now here are all of the gradations. Bein she'asu v'asa imahen. If they, Bezdin, did the Avera, and he, the individual, did the Avera, or Bein She'asu Ve'asa Acharehem, or Bezdin did it, and the individual didn't do it with Bezdin, but did it afterwards. Bein Shelo Asu, whether or not Bezdin didn't do it themselves, Ve'asa, but the individual did do it. So says the Gemara, Hare Ze Pater. Another thing we're going to see is there's a lot of corrections in the text. A lot of pieces of Gemara will be removed, Pashut. You will see one today where we're going to skip a few lines. There's the syntax here. The text is a little bit more complicated than other Masechtas. We've seen that also Maseches Shkalim. We've seen a couple Masechtas like that. So in all of these cases, Pater, why would the individual be Pater from a Korban Chatas? After all, I did something wrong, says the Gemara, Mipnei Shetala Bebezdin. The reason why is because they were dependent on a psak from a Rav. Not just a Rav, from Sanhedrin. We're not talking about your average Shul Rabbi, and no knock to the Shul Rabbi. Their psak is also very important. We're talking about Sanhedrin, who said that which is an Isser D'oraisa is totally mutter. That's case number one of the Mishnah. Case two, Horu Bezdin v'yada echad mehen sheto. Let's say Bezdin, Sanhedrin gives a psak, you're allowed to eat chelev, and one person knew that there was a mistake there. They knew that it wasn't, they didn't believe the psak. They knew something was wrong. Oh, Talmud v'hu ro le'ora. Or there was a Talmud and he was really fit for hora. V'holach v'asa al pihen. And they listened to this psak, even though people knew that something was wrong. Then, same parameters as before. Bein she'asu v'asa iman, whether or not the individual did the Avera with Sanhedrin. Bein she'asu v'asa acharem, whether or not the individual did the Avera after Bezdin. Bein she'lo asu v'asa, whether or not the Bezdin didn't do the Avera at all, and he did it harei ze chayiv. Why is this guy chayiv? After all, Bezdin paskind, even though it was clearly, even out of the gates, we knew that there was something wrong with the psak. Because his activities were not based on Bezdin. The guy knew that something was wrong with the psak of Bezdin. If we wake up tomorrow morning and the CRC or the Aguda puts out a little thing that says pig is kosher, I'm sorry, you should know better. Something's wrong with that. You should know better. So don't do that. You know that there's something wrong with the psak. Now that doesn't mean we should question the psakim that Rabbanim give us. We should accept the psakim. If you know something's wrong, push back. If you don't know, accept the psak. And then the Mishnah seems to repeat itself. We'll call this out in the Gemara in a little bit. Ze'aklal, says the Gemara, what is the principle that we've learned over here? The Gemara says, Hatole be'atzmo chayev, hatole bebezdin pater. So we repeat the same thing, that if you're going to depend on your own opinion and you're going to make a bad call, guess what? You're chayev a korban. You're a fool. You shouldn't have done that. However, ve'atol bebezdin, if in fact what you are following is Bezdin's psak, the Sanhedrin's psak, so then the halacha is that you're pater. The Gemara opens with a statement from Shmuel, really a machlokas between Shmuel and Rav Dimi min Arda. Amar Shmuel, olam ein Bezdin chayaven ad sheyomru lahem mutarim atem. When do we say that a Bezdin is going to be chayav the par helam dover shel tzibor, the korban, that not the chatas? The chatas is for the individual. When do we say that the Bezdin will be obligated to bring this korban? That's only if they use the language of mutarim atem. Let's flesh out the sentence. Mutarim atem to eat chaylev. Okay, mutarim atem. If they say mutarim atem, then that is when Bezdin is chayav a par helam davar shel tzibor. However, Rav Dimi min Arda amar no, ad shiyormu lehem mutarim atem la asos. You are allowed to eat. You need to add the verb in afterwards. So that means that according to Rav Dimi min Arda, if they say mutarim atem without the word la asos, that's not a psak from Sanhedrin. We need a super, super, super explicit line from them that says you're allowed to do this activity, not just mutter. You can't just say mutter. You're allowed to eat. Go eat chaylev. You're allowed to eat chaylev. That's what Rav Dimi Arda says is the standard to bring about the par ha'elam davar shel tzibur. My time. Why is it that Rav Dimi Arda holds this way? Vishalon nigmar hora. Because without that, the hora is not done. Just saying something is mutter. Who says you're not just talking and learning? The only way we know that you're done with a psak is by saying, go eat. When you make it really lemaisa, then you're done. I mutter, yeah, but 10 minutes later you might have said, oh, sorry, well, the Gemara seems this way. So that's why the Gemara says in the name of Rabbi Dimi min Arda that we have to be even more explicit in order for the Sanhedrin to be chayav par halam davar shel tzibur. A third of the way down. Now we're going to bring 3 proofs in a row to this sheet of Rabbi Dimi min Arda. Let's remember what he said. Mutarim atem la'asos, the more explicit language. Amar Abai, here's proof number 1. Afana Nami Tanina, we have a brisa. This is about a Zakein Mamre, about an individual from Sanhedrin who paskins against Sanhedrin. Chazar Li'iro, if this person goes back to his city, the Zakein Mamre, Shana Valimid Kederach Shalom made pater. If he just repeats what he was initially teaching, he's pater. Horelasos, but if the Zakein Mamre paskins, not just talks and learning, but if he paskins to the city, you can do this, even though Sanhedrin, the rest of Sanhedrin said no, chayiv. So here we see by the Zakein Mamre that the standard at which the Zakein Mamre becomes chayiv, and he can even be put to death based on his actions, the Zakein Mamre. So that's true only when there's la'asos, only a more explicit language, which is proof number 1. Amar Rabbi Abba Afana Nami Tanina. We have another proof about this as well. This is a case where there's only one aid that a man died and the woman would like to remarry. So says the Gemara, Horu la Bezdin lihinase. Let's say Bezdin gives a psak. It's based on one aid. Let's say Bezdin gives a psak, she's allowed to remarry. The halcha, the kilkala. And then she goes and she's promiscuous. She sleeps with someone, but not for the sake of marriage, just znus. Right? So Bezdin said you can get married, and she decided, I don't want to do that, but I will sleep with that particular person. And then Baharug Biraglav, the husband shows up from the wherever that people always fall off the planet, the Bermuda Triangle. He shows up, he's alive and well. Says the Gemara, Chayeves bekorban. She's chayev for a chatas for sleeping with whoever that person she's up to, because the heter that she had wasn't to be promiscuous. There is no heter for that. That's never allowed. Well, you're allowed to remarry, but the fact that she didn't follow the psak of Bezdin and she cohabited with somebody else, what was the heter? So this is raya number 2, that she wasn't given that heter, and she went beyond the heter. So that's raya number 2 that Rav Dimi is correct that ad sheyomru lehem mutar matem lasos. And the third raya Amar Ravina afananami tonin in our Mishnah horu bezin lavar alachas mikol mitzvos amuros betorah sulo midi. Nothing else to talk about. The Torah, the Mishnah is extremely explicit where it says al achas mikol mitzvos amuros betorah la'avor. You are allowed to violate. You're allowed to do this action. So what we see over here is that between the shitas of Rav Dimi and Shmuel, it is crystal clear that we paskin like Rav Dimi with a triple raya. And in fact, this is what's quoted in the Rambam in Hilchos Shigagos, that if one does not say, if the Bezdin does not say mutarim atem la'asos with that last action, the verb word of doing the answer, the Bezdin will not be chayiv in bringing the par helam davar shel tzibor, and you as the individual will be chayiv for your action because you actually weren't following Bezdin because Bezdin didn't really fully paskin. Saying mutarim atem is not enough. Mutarim atem la'asos is enough. However, says the Gemara, there's a problem because it could be that the shitas were flipped. Ika de Amri, halfway down on Daf Beis, the Gemara says, Ika de Amri, Amar Shmuel, Ein Bezin Chayav and Ad Sheyomru Lemutar Matem Lasos. Here we see Shmuel, not Rav Dimi, the names and shitas switch. Shmuel is the one who said we need the stronger, more explicit language. Rav Dimi min Arda Amar Afilu Mutar Matem Nigmar Hora. No, it'll even be considered a final psak, even if they only say Mutarim Atem. So now we see that Rav Dimi is wrong, because we had all the 3 rayas from before. So now the Gemara says it uses all 3 rayas not to say yes, but to say no. Amar Abaye to this new version of Rav Dimi. The first version of Rav Dimi was the more explicit one. Now he scaled back to Mutar Matem. Amar Abaye, lo t'nan hachi. That's not what the Mishnah said. And this is kasha number 1 against Rav Dimi. We see by the Zaken Mamre that the Zaken Mamre is only chai with the more explicit language. And Amar Rabbi Abba, the next Mishnah that we learned about the Isha, is also not like that shita of Rav Dimi, which is only mutarim atem. Horu bezin linasiv v'halcha v'kilkala. She slept with the wrong person. That wasn't what Bezdin was matir her to do. Chayavis b'korban tzalitira linase. What about the third mari makom? Amar Abai v'halot tanan hachi. Our Mishnah is not like that either. You can't say that Rav Dimi that it's only mutarim lasos. Horu bezin lavar alachas mikol mitzvos amoros b'torah sulamidi. And therefore we reject version 2 of Rav Dimi. In other words, both versions of the Gemara are crystal clear that the only time that Bezdin is chayv par helam davar shel tzibor is with a more explicit language, mutarim atem la'asos. If that's not what they say, and they just say mutarim atem, Bezdin's potter from a par helam davar shel tzibor, and the individual is chayv a korban. That's what we see, and it's clear. The only thing we were trying to handle was Rav Dimi the author or not. So in the first version, we paskin like Rav Dimi. In the second version, we reject Rav Dimi and accept Shmuel. But the psak is exactly the same. The psak is that we have a very high standard for what a bezdin has to do to be guilty of Horiyos, to be guilty of giving a psak that isn't correct. Super explicit. You are allowed to eat this chaylev, go eat it, have a good time. Then bezdin is chayv in a par halam davar shel tzibor, and you're pater from achatas. Anything short of that explicit language, you would be pater from a korban, and they would be chayiv. So says the Gemara. That brings us to the 2 dots, 2/3 of the way down. Says the Gemara, shogeg al PM. This was a little bit of the complex language. If you look back at the top of the page in the Mishnah on the second of the actual lines, the Gemara says that if Bezdin teaches that you're allowed to violate, let's say eating chaylev, look at this language, the individual went v'asa shogeg, and he did a shogeg al PM. So says the Gemara, v'nisni v'asa al PM. Just say that he did what they said. Shogeg, what do you mean shogeg? Pashut, it was a shogeg. The guy wasn't intending on eating treif. He was listening to the Psak of Bezdin. Bezdin was selling fats. You can't tell the difference between chaylev and shuman. They look exactly the same, except that chaylev is an isser deraisa to eat, and shuman is mutter. So Bezdin paskins, this is considered to be the shuman, whatever. They paskin the chaylev's mutter. So why are you calling that a shogeg? Else the person, he was doing exactly what he was told. Says the Gemara, Omar Rava. This is going to be our first version over here. Shogeg le'asuye. What does the word shogeg come to teach me in the Mishnah? Horu bezdin shechelev muter. V'nischalef lochelev b'shumim v'achal pater. Says the Gemara, they paskind that chelev was muter, and it got switched, and he ate. It got switched with shuman. V'achlu pater, that he would still be pater. So he thought he was eating shuman. The syntax here is actually not really great. He thought he was eating shuman, but really he ate chelev. So what was his mindset? I'm eating shuman. Not even what Bezdin. Bezdin did say that the chelev was mutter, but he didn't even. He thought he was eating shuman, and then he ended up eating chelev. So even that case of shogeg would have been the case where he would have been pater. Al pihem. What does the next part of the Mishnah mean? Again, the end of that third line of the Gemara, where it says v'halach hayachi b'asa shogeg al pihem. Al pihem mamish will also be pater when he listens to them. So one way or the other, if he eats the chelev because he thought it was chelev because they paskin leheter, or if he ate chelev when he thought he was eating shuman, in both cases he would be pater. All that is version 1 of Rava. And here is the second version, last of the short lines on Beis Amud Aleph. Yikuda Amri Amar Rava Shogeg Al PM Hu Depater Aval Nischalev Lochel V'Shum Avach Lochayv. No. The only time you're pater, says the second version of Rava, the only time you're pater is when you're functioning Al Pihem. They said this chelev is mutter and you eat that. However, if nischalev lochelev b'shuman, you thought you were eating shuman and then you ate chelev, then you're going to be chayav b'korban. That's mamish a regular shogeg. When we find out later that they were wrong, it turns out you weren't listening to them. All you were doing was eating shuman, which you thought was mutter. So that's what the Gemara says, that Rava, these two different versions are opposite, because Rava in one case says that if you thought you were eating shuman and you ate chelev, you're chayav, and that's the second version. And the first version is that you're pater. And it's interesting because on the first of the long line, the Gemara says, Milsa de Pshitale de Rava, that which was obvious to Rava. I don't know how you could say it's obvious to Rava. We just had an Ika de Amre about Rava. Rava wasn't confused. He wasn't the one who was confused. Some of his Talmidim might have been confused. So whichever version of him was Pashut, we don't know. But Milsa de Pshitale de Rava, Kami Boile de Rami Bar Chama. Says the Gemara, Rami Bar Chama was not settled with this idea of Nischalef lo Chel b'Shuman v'Achlo. How do we know that? The boy Rami Bar Chama, he had posed this as a question. What would be the psak in this case? So Amar Rava tries to answer up for Rami Bar Chama, and he says on the second of the wide lines, Tashma, let's see, why is it that our Gemara, that our Mishnah says the language of Shogeg al Piyam like version number 1? So he says back to him, Rami Bar Chama says, no, that doesn't work at all, because Dilma Shogeg al Piyam hu depater. Maybe it's only a Shogeg al Piyam. Well, that's when I ate the chelev thinking it was mutter because Bezdin told me. But aval nischalev lo chelev b'shuman v'ach lochayev. But I eat. Rami Bar Chama is like, why is your psak? So why do you think you're right? It very well could be that what you're saying is not true. When I'm eating al PM, Bezdin says chelev's mutter, I say, thank you very much, sha'akolni abidvar, put it in my mouth. That's eating al PM. But in the case of nischalev, though, I thought I was eating shuman and then I ate chelev. That's not al PM. That's me not knowing what I'm doing. I ate the wrong food. I wasn't careful. So there the Gemara says that's how Rami Bar Chama pushes back and says, I don't agree with you, because al PM is different than the din of shogeg. Then the Gemara says, Ika de Amre. Let's try again, the second version of Rava. Amar Rava Toshma halach yachid basa shogeg al piyam. I love shogeg al piyam hu de pater. Aval nischalev lo chelev b'shuman v'ach lochayev. Version 2 of Rava, right? Because we didn't know, even the Gemara is living in both camps here. Maybe version 2 of Rava is right, and Milsa de Pshitale de Rava wasn't so pashat to Rami Bar Chama. So he says, I'll show you from over here that it's chayav. Says Gemara, no, Dilma, o shogeg, o al piyam. Lav dafka, that it's like you. It could be that it's either or both. But there's no proof to what you're saying. The language of the Mishnah is not mukhrach enough, says Rami Bar Chama, to tell me exactly what it is. And not only was he unsettled about this, even though Rava was settled, whatever that means, but the Gemara says, Beplugta, Horu Bezdin Shechelev Mutter, V'nischalef lo chelev b'shuman v'achlo, Rabba Amar Pater, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayev. So we see that this is Taka Machlokas. Let's look at the history books here. Who were the earlier of the group here? This is Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. They were earlier. So Rava had clarity. Rami Bar Chama lived at the same time, 4th century of Amoraim, lived at the same time, and he wasn't sure. But Rav and Rabbi Yochanan predated him by about, 75 years, give or take, approximately, maybe 100 years. So it was clear, I guess it's clear, that Rami Bar Chama had not heard about this machlokas. All right, so now we have clarity that there's a machlokas as to whether or not nischalev lochel b'shuman ve'achlo, whether or not it's pater or chayiv. Rav holds it's pater. Rav Yochanan holds that you are chayiv. As you can see, there's a little mark of the Rambam there in the word chayiv, which means that if Bezdin gives a psak that chaylev is mutter, and I then eat that chaylev, not because it was al PM, I wasn't following what Bezdin said, I just pasha thought it was shuman and I was wrong. That's not acting al pihem. That was talaba atzmi. So therefore, I'm going to be chayav for a chatas for that. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. I have a kasha against the sheet of Rabbi Yochanan, a sophisticated question, a few lines of a question. Meisve, the pasuk says, me ma'aretz basosa prat lemumar, that a mumar, someone who does activities lahachis, they don't bring a chatas. Their chatas is useless. If I intentionally do an avera, well, I guess in general, if I'm a mumar, I guess that's what a mumar is. A mumar is someone who intentionally doesn't keep halacha. This comes up in these awkward conversations with parents. Oh, Rabbi Karesh, I know you're out of town. Did you hear about conservative Moel X or Reform Rabbi Y or Cantor so and so who does the bris? What would you say about them? Should we use them? So halacha l'maisa, they're a mumar. If they don't keep Shabbos, they don't keep kashrus, they don't keep Taharas, they're a mumar. And if they're a mumar, dino kigoy, their bris is not kosher. So it's very uncomfortable. I just have to say the truth. If a person doesn't keep the covenant, they can't be the practitioner of the covenant. It's not allowed. So that doesn't always go over very well, as you can imagine. But a mumar is someone who doesn't keep halacha with intent. So therefore, who intentionally doesn't keep halacha. So therefore, they're a mumar. So a mumar, says the Gemara, based on the drasha, they can't bring a chatas. Reb Shimon ben Yossi, Omer Mishum Reb Yossi. Harehu Omer Ashalos says Bishkag B'Hashem Hoda. So says the Gemara. Let's now learn the drasha from this statement of Reb Shimon ben Yossi. The pasuk says Asher Lo Se'asena Bishkag B'Hashem Hoda. Hashav miyadi yaso. If a person would have known and he wouldn't have done the action, then maybe korban al shigigaso. Then he would have brought a korban. However, lo shav miyadi yaso, then eno maybe korban al shigigaso. But if he wouldn't have changed his mind, then he's really like a mumar. He's really like someone doing it intentionally, and he would not bring a korban on the shogeg. V'imisa, and these words go back to Rav Yochanan. V'imisa, that Rav Yochanan is right, that in the case of hora bezdin shechelev muter v'nischalef lo chelev b'shuman v'achlo, that you're chayev, halo shav miyadiyasahu. This person would never have gone back on their ways. Let's get the case clear. Let's remember, he was nischalef. So what ended up happening? I ate shuman. I thought I ate shuman. I intended on eating shuman. Turned out it was chelev. Now, what would I have done had I known it was chelev? I still would have eaten it. Why? Because Bezdin was matir. So in that case, Rav Yochanan, the guy's not shav miyadiyaso. I wouldn't have changed my mind either way. So this brisa falls out as a question on Rav Yochanan. So the Gemara says, Amar Papa Kasav Rav Yochanan, you're asking on the wrong level. You're asking if he would have known about the chelev that Bezdin paskin on. No, you have to ask, what if Bezdin corrected itself? Kasav Rav Yochanan, the cave nechimis yadalahu lebeidina hadre behu v'hu nami hadarbe. Let's say Bezdin woke up. They said, "Oi, Hashem Yirachim, we were matir and isur daraisiv eating chelev." So what if the yid who thought he was eating shuman but was really eating chelev? What if he found out that Bezdin changed their psak? So then, of course, he would have changed his mind. Then that person would have definitely gone back. He would totally have done that, and therefore, if he's still going to eat it, that's a big problem. You're chayiv because you're doing it on purpose. So Rav Yochanan wriggles out of the question, and in fact, we paskin like him that again, if I'm eating a food that I think is mutter, but it's actually asur, and Bezdin actually paskin that food is mutter, doesn't matter. You're still going to be chayiv because you were not acting al pihem. And Amar Rava says 2 lines from the bottom, Moder Rav, even Rav agrees. Rav, who says that you'd be pater in such a case for eating that which you thought was shuman but turned out to be chelev, he agrees she'eno mashlam the rov tzibur. Remember that when we do talk about a scenario of horu bezin labord, like the case of our Mishnah, the case of par helam davar shel tzibur, when the Sanhedrin makes a mistake, it's only true of rov of Klal Yisrael falls for it, and they actually eat the chelev or whatever isser it was. So Rav says that this guy, even though he's putter, he doesn't count for the rove. So let's say that there are 100 people, 50 people is not yet rove, 51 is rove. So 50 people ate the food. The last guy is this guy, according to Rav. Rav says he doesn't count as one of the people, even though he ate the food. Why is that? He's putter. Why? Because he didn't eat it with the right mindset. That's what Rav says. She'enu mashlam l'rov tzibur my time because Amar Kra b'shkaga achu kulan b'shkaga achas. But they don't have the same shkaga. They don't have the same exact mindset. Most of the people ate the chaylev because it was al piyam, because that's what Bezdin said. But this guy did not eat the chaylev because it's what Bezdin said. He ate the chaylev because he thought it was mutter, because he thought it was shuman. So therefore, until we have the majority of the city listening to Sanhedrin in the way in which they should have listened to Sanhedrin, which is eat the chaylev, all of a sudden Yitz is making chaylev for us for our suda, and we're the majority of. That's when you have the Sanhedrin bringing the Parhalim Davar Shel Tzibur. But if half of us listened to Bezdin and the other half of us thought that the food he made was kosher and we ate it for those purposes, that's not a rov, and therefore Bezdin would not be chayav a Parhalim Davar Shel Tzibur. 2 lines from the bottom, we'll learn for about 15 more minutes or so. Bein she'asu v'asa iman. Our Mishnah had gone through all of these gradations in the Reisha and in the Seifa. In the Reisha, we said that they had paskin that chaylev was mutter, and the Gemara said, well, if they ate it with them, even if they didn't eat it with them, but they ate it afterwards, or even if he ate it and they didn't eat it at all. So it says the Gemara, lama le'lemisna kol hani. Why is it that we have these 3 gradations of eating together, eating separately, and then him eating alone? So says the Gemara, Bishlama Resha, Lozu Asuktani. I understand. Yeah, you can eat. Says the Gemara that in the Resha, it's Lozu Asuktani. In the Resha, yeah, not only in this case would you be pater, but even if it was without Bezdin. And even if Bezdin didn't eat themselves, you'd still be pater. Lozu Asuktani, that makes perfect sense. Ella says the Gemara, Seifa de l'chiyuva. But says the Gemara, that in the Seifa, the second case of the Mishnah, where we knew that there was a mistake, already. So because we knew there was a mistake, so then then the list is ordered in a backward fashion. The list should have gone from least severe to most severe. That would have been more of a chiddush. But the Mishnah is listed in the Reish and the Sefer in the same order. So it's not scaling the right way. It's not like, and even this. No, the list is running the wrong direction in the Sefer. So the Gemara says, turning to the top of Beis and Beis, the Gemara says you're 100% right. Zu ve'ein tzarich lomar zu katani. Just another formatting of, you're right. We keep it in the same order. This, and not only that, but of course this. Not only that, but of course this. And that solves that problem. Now the Mishnah turns. We're quoting the Mishnah on the top line here on Beis and Beis. The Gemara says that we knew that there was something wrong with the psak. Tarte lamali. Why do I need both of these cases? The case of Yeda Echad Man Shato, or that it was a Talmud v'roy lehora, that he was the one who gave the psak. He was a student, but he gave the psak. Amarava Itzrich, we need both of these cases, that we knew there was a mistake, or it was a Talmud who was roy lehora. Sal kadai techamina. The reason why is because hani mili gamer v'savir. I might have thought that we're only talking about someone who is gamer, who's very learned, v'savir, and he's very bright. The savir component means that he is able to extrapolate psak from one case to another. Let's say a Dayan level Talmud Chacham. Most of the smichas of Rabbanim that we have in the United States of America is Yore. They know a little bit of halacha, they know some Mishnah Berurah, they know some psakim. But lav dafka that they can extrapolate from one. The Dayanim of our community know how to extrapolate from one case to another. So I might have thought that this was only true, that a Bezdin would only be pater from the Parhalim Davar Shel Tzibur if the mistake was by a Gamir v'Savir. But I might have thought about Gamir v'Lo Savir, a lesser Talmud Chacham Lo. So that's why we needed to have both cases. Amar le Abaye says back to Rava, I'm not sure I agree with you. And the missing word over here is Ra'oi. Ra'oi lehora Gamir v'Savir mashma. No, I disagree with you. Had it been Gamir v'Lo Savir, the lesser Talmud Chacham, so then that his psak doesn't count. So Abaye and Rava don't agree to the standard. Rava seems to say even a Gamer V'lo Saber can make a psak. Abaye says, what are you talking about? That's for sure not true. So Amar Le, Rava says back to Abaye, Ana hachi ka'amina. This is what I mean. Ime hahi havamina hani mili Gamer V'savir, aval Gamer V'lo Savir lo. Therefore, Tana Roi lehora. Mishnah Yasera afilu Gamer V'lo Savir. And then the next 3 words are omitted before the 2 dots. So what Rava does is he learns from the extra wording of our Mishnah. We have a Mishnah Yasera. Abaye was kind of looking more conceptually. Abaye was looking and saying, hey, it really doesn't make sense this way. He said it only makes sense if they're a Talmud Chacham. And the Gemara says, no. Rava pushes back. He says there's Mishnah Yasera, there's some extra words. And from the extra words, Rava seems to be right. That in order for a Bezdin to violate the Isser of Parhalim Davar Shel Tzibur, the person can even be Gomer V'lo Sabir, the lesser version of a Talmud Chacham. At the two dots, 10 lines down on Beis Amud Beis, the Gemara says, Roy Lahora, Kigon Man, who are the people who were Talmidim, but they were Roy Lahora? So says the Gemara, Amar Rava, Kigon Shimon ben Azai, Shimon ben Zoma. Names we've heard about in Shas. And Rashi says over here, or whoever is 7 lines down, Shahu Yoshua Lifnei Chacham Vayruin Lahora Kedamrin Beparakam the Sanhedrin, Don Lifnei Chacham Shimon ben Azai Shimon ben Zoma. But they were very young. They were very young at that time. So they were Talmidim. So that's what the Gemara says. These were the people who we're talking about. Amar le Abaye, wait 1 second. Ki hai gavna mezidhu. I don't understand. You're talking about these Talmidim. There's a mezid component over here. We know that they're wrong. That's what our Mishnah said. V'yeda echad mehan shato. We know that there's something wrong with the psak. Why are we even talking in terms of pater? What do you know? You're eating treif pashut. It's mezid. We know that there was a mistake. It says the Gemara that Rava pushes back on Abaye. Ulatamech, according to you, Abaye, Hadatanya, what do we do with the following brisa? This is a brisa that doesn't seem like we've seen before. Titanya ba'asosa achas yachid ha'ose mipi atzmo chayev be'oraz bezdin pater. So the Gemara says, quoting a brisa, that if a yachid does an action of his own accord, it's not because of Bezdin, he will of course be chayiv. I decide to eat chaylev because I'm not stark today. That's on me. However, behoras Bezdin, the Brisa says you'd be pater. So says the Gemara, according to Brisa, Ketzad, what's the case? Horu Bezdin shechaylev mutter v'noda le'echad men sheto tamid yoshed livnei v'ro lehora kigon Shimon ben Azai yachol yehi pater. You might have thought that you would have been pater in such a case. Talmud Lomar ba'asosa achas yachida osa al piatz mochai be'oraz bezdin pater. So says the Gemara, what then is the case where we would in fact have a chiyuv? Because it seems to say over here that it's still be'oraz bezdin that you'd be pater. It must be kigon to yada de aser v'katay b'mitzvah lishma divrei chachamim. Says the Gemara, very clever. They knew that it was aser. They made a mistake in the following way. They thought b'mitzvah lishma divrei chachamim, that the mitzvah to listen to the Chachamim is even in a scenario where you know they're wrong. That's actually a pasuk in the Torah, that she'agidu lecha yaminu small. If they say right is left and left is right. So that doesn't mean that they can be pashut wrong in halacha. But that's not what it means. But there is a middle ground where there are times Chachamim can say things that are big chidushim. L'didi nami, he says, I hold the same way. The Tova mitzvah should be Chachamim. That's how it's possible to understand the brisa. Halfway down, where are we? 9:36. All right, 9 more minutes. Almost 9 more minutes, maybe a little bit less. Okay, 7 more minutes. 6 more minutes. Says the Gemara, Li'isuye mai, Li'isuye mevayit be'ora. Why did our Mishnah repeat the principle that if you are tola ba'atzmo, if I'm just doing my own thing, a little bit of chaylev, I'm going to have some chaylev, pasha, you're going. Why did the Mishnah repeat the principle? Zehaklal. Why did we have to do that? So says the Gemara, li'isuye mevayit behora. We have a couple Jews like this. We have people who think that they know how to paskin on their own, even though they're not poskin. They say, I know better. I'm going to paskin. Oh, Rabbi Reese, Rabbi First, whoever, Rabbi Rabbi said, yeah, thank you. I'm fine. That person is called mevayit behora. If listen carefully. If a person is mevayit behora, and Sanhedrin says you're allowed to eat chaylev, and he eats chaylev, he's chayav a korban. The rest of Klal Yisrael is pater from the korban, because this guy doesn't care about Sanhedrin. He only cares about his own psak, and he's not a posek. There are unfortunately people like that who just don't care what the chachamim of our community say. Rahman al-Islam. That's not right. Yeah, but we ignore him. He's not a das yachid. He's a zero. His opinion doesn't matter, and he's rebelling against the system. So it could be that 1 million Jews in the community, 999,999 ate the food that the Chachamim said, the Cheled, they said it's mutter, even though it's usher, they're all pater. But this guy who's mevayit be'ora, he listened. This time, no, he's not listening to them. He's listening to himself. He's looking in the mirror. Oh, it's mutter. It's mutter. He holds. So therefore, mevayit be'ora, he is one of the exceptions to the rule. That's not this case. That's not this case. That's also not a psak from Sanhedrin, because they wouldn't give out a psak like that. They have to agree. Tola bebezdin. What about that was the case? What about tola bebezdin? That when we are tola bebezdin le'asuye, what case is that going to include? What is our Mishnah adding by speaking about the case of tola bebezdin? Hore bezdin v'yadu shetov v'chazru behen The case is Horu Bezdin v'yadu shato v'chazru behed. The case was where Bezdin knew they made a mistake, and they announced, "Uh-oh, we made a mistake." But after they announced their mistake, someone still ate the food, not for any malicious reasons. He just didn't hear the announcement. So what do you do in such a case? So that case is going to be included of Tola Bezdin. You're putter. So let's get the flow of events correct, right? Bezdin at 9 a.m. Paskins that Chaylev is mutter. At 10 a.m. they realize that they made a mistake and they start throwing up pashkevilin around the community. We made a mistake. Chaylev is usher 10 a.m. But I don't live on the main street, so I didn't see the notes and I didn't hear the foghorns. And at 11 a.m. I ate the chaylev that they said at 9 a.m. was mutter. They remembered at 10 a.m. that it wasn't mutter. I'm putter in that case. The fact that I didn't find out yet, so that's the chiddush of the seif of the Mishnah where it says zehaklal to teach me that I'm going to be putter in such a case. What? I'm sorry. I ask afterwards just because I know, but I want you to share it afterwards because I have very, very little time. But please tell me afterwards because I do want to hear it. So it says the Gemara, wait 1 second. That can't be the chiddush of our Mishnah because ha behedjak tanila. We already learned that in an explicit Mishnah. We're not going to see it today. It says the Gemara, tani v'hadam mefarish. You're right. Yeah, we're going to teach it again. Let's just learn a drop more. Actually, let's not learn a drop more because this is going to bleed into a whole nother sugya. Let's stop right here at Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Let's bench, and then we can fresh more if we want. Whatever is good for you. Do we say Shir Amalos? I never know. I do. What are you paskening on your own? You're like a Vaid Allah. I have no idea. But let's bench it. We have a coin? Any coin? I think you should do the beer cut. What? This is your covet.
We have a minion star, right?
How many people you need 7 people who ate bread. There's 7. This says 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Dad, did you eat bread? 7, Rob? And Eric didn't eat. We don't. It's just regular zim. I did. Still not 7. Go ahead.
How about the red zone of no,